Le peuple camerounais, la jeunesse
The Cameroonian people, the youth of Cameroon, are demanding their victory by majority vote. We all know that Cameroon, the people, voted overwhelmingly for Issa Shuruma.
My dear compatriots, the situation is serious. We will not allow having our victory stolen from us.
There is something happening in Cameroon. Just picture this, a nation rich in oil, cocoa, and cultural diversity, teetering on the edge. Why? For years, the English-speaking region of Cameroon had been engulfed in a brutal conflict, a silent war that the world often ignored. And in the midst of this, a presidential election is held. The incumbent, win by a landscape, the government declares it a resounding victory for democracy. But on the streets, in the homes, and in the harsh conversation of millions, a different story is told. A story of a ghost town, of a people too terrified to vote, of separatist fighters threatening anyone who participates, and of an opposition that cries foul before the first ballot is even cast. Look, this is not a hypothetical scenario. This is a Cameroon October 2025 election, and as the nation convulses with post-election demonstration and a deep-seated political crisis, one question echoes across West and Central Africa. Why is Ecowas? Why is the regional body so vocal in other crises, so conspicuously silenced in Cameroon? To understand these protests today, we must first understand the election that sparked them. Let's break down why the recent presidential vote in Cameroon is being labeled as a sham and non-event by critics and a significant portion of the population. Now, the incumbent Paul Biya, at 92 years, and he has ruled Cameroon for 42 years now. His government is frequently accused of authoritarianism, suppressing dissent, and systemic corruption. For many, the idea of a free and fair election under his rule is from the outset a far-fetched fantasy. This is the most critical factor since 2016. Now, to look at the critical factor in this, in October 2025, the eyes of Africa turned once again to Cameroon. As long as President Paul Biya was declared winner of the presidential election at 92 years, he is not the only one of the world's oldest head of state, but now he faces perhaps the toughest post-election period of his 43-year rule. But the story does not end with the declaration. What follows is the unrest protest, accusation of fraud, and a curious silence from regional bodies such as the African Union and the Economic Community of West African States, Ecowas. And what does it mean for Cameroon and the continent? Let's unpack it in three parts. 1. What's happened in the elections and immediate aftermath. 2. How the country is reacting, demonstrating. What is the state's response? And 3. Why does Ecowas or the African Union appear muted in this issue? The presidential election was held on 12th of October 2025. Paul Biya, in office since 1982, ran for an 8th term. The final official result, Biya declared winner with 43.66% of the vote. His main challenger, Issa Shuruma, was credited with about 35.19%. Shuruma, however, claimed he had won, citing his tally at 54.8%. That was the allegation of widespread irregularities, relocation of police stations, dead voters on registers, opaque results. Voting and counting in conflict-affected Anglophone region raised extra questions. Media and civil society flagged the process as lacking transparency. Now, whether one supports Biya or not, the election triggered a legitimacy crisis. A leader declared winner, but a large segment of the population saying we were robbed. In effect, the invitation to the contest was accepted, but the condition and the results are in dispute. Soon after the election results were announced, tension exploded. In cities like Douala and Yaoundé, protesters took to the streets, blocked roads, burned tires. At least 4 people were reported killed in Douala in crashes with security forces. Arrests have been made of opposition leaders and activists. The government declared bans on public gathering, imposed internet disruption in some regions at least. Security forces used tear gas, water cannons, and in some reports, live ammunition. What does this mean for Cameroon? Youths are especially frustrated. Large under 35 population, high unemployment, and perception of system being rigged. The Anglophone crisis in the northwest and the southwest regions continue to impose a heavy burden and adds to distrust of central institutions. The result, a brew of anger, hope for change, repression, which means the risk of a cycle of unrest is real. What we observed is that the AU deployed an election observation mission to Cameroon, arriving 7th October for the vote. Yet, when the result came and the protest began, there has been no high-profile condemnation or strong statement from the AU or Ecowas as of yet, at least in the public domain. The silence or muted response is striking, given the scale of unrest and allegation of fraud. Regional bodies often tread carefully in member states' internal politics. Challenging a long-serving president may be seen as interference, but the AU in particular has been criticized for lack of follow-through when members violate democratic norms. Its credibility may limit both responses. Cameroon is strategically important in Central Africa. Anglophone conflict, Boko Haram in the north, oil or cocoa economic, regional bodies might fear destabilizing the state. Even if they wanted to act, Ecowas or the African Union may lack mechanism to impose consequences, especially with a regime already entrenched. Possibly, they are waiting for a full internal assessment or negotiating behind closed doors rather than issuing a public statement. But this silence sends a signal that democratic standards may be secondary to stability or real politics within the region. For citizens in Cameroon and across Africa, such silence may deepen cynicism about regional bodies and the promise of African solution. This may embolden other regions to ignore opposition claims or civil society demands, knowing the regional cause of ignition in minimal. What we are seeing in Cameroon in late 2025 is more than a contested election. It's a legitimacy crisis for the state, its institutions, and for Biya rules. The demonstrations reflect more than one disputed result. They reflect generational discontent, structural division, Anglophone versus Francophone, economic stagnation, and political exhaustion. The fact that AU or Ecowas remains largely on the sidelines must be read as part of a broader pattern. Regional governance framework often lack the teeth or will to enforce democratic norms when great power, factors, or strategic interests are at play. Will these protests escalate or be contained? The number of deaths, arrests, and internet blackouts suggest risks of further violence. Will opposition actors cohere into a unified front, or they will be fragmented and crushed? Will Biya's government respond with concessions or repressions? What happens to Cameroon democracy? Is this elections a turning point for worse or a moment of recalibration? Can young people and civil society leverage this moment for lasting change? What will the African Union or ECOWAS do after the fact? Impose conditions, demands reforms, send an observer critic. Their next move will affect their regional standing. For Africa, the Cameroonian case may set precedent. Long-serving presidents, contested elections, regional inactions. If this becomes normalized, the democratic architect of the continent is at risk. Conversely, it may pose reformers inside African Union and ECOWAS to demand stronger protocols, enforceable sanctions, and genuine electoral oversight. Now, the 2025 Cameroon election isn't just about one man or one vote. It's about systems, trust, voices, and expectations. The protests are not only against Paul Biya, they are for something different: transparency, generational change, meaningful participation, and the regional silence. It says something about power, purpose, and possibility in African governance. And now, remember, when history looks back, it will not remember the throne, it will remember the cry that rose from the street and said enough, the cry that turned fear into fire, the cry that proved that Cameroon is not asleep, Cameroon is awakening, because no crown is forever, no silence is eternal. This is the sound of the people writing their story in blood, in truth, and in hope. This is the current situation of Cameroons and what Paul Biya government is doing to the country at large. What are your opinion in the happenings in Cameroon and the elections that took place? Wherever it is, drop it in the comment section. Thank you for watching this platform.